What is up, everybody? We are back with our team reviews. We are 6 teams away from finishing. It is Tuesday, August 22nd. We've had 2 preseason weeks in the books, so lots of hype, lots of injuries, lots of everything, lots of news. Football season is getting closer. I think we're, is it 2 weeks from this Thursday, I believe, is the kickoff, Chiefs-Lions. So exciting times for sure. Dad, today we are going over the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are getting some hype. People are getting excited about them and their offense, and it looks like they're throwing the ball a lot in preseason, and so people are excited. Have you been able to catch any football action this weekend, and anything specific on the Steelers? Or
nothing specific on the Steelers. I caught a little bit of I think one of their games, and their passing game looked a little better. So obviously, Kenny Pickett kind of he had kind of a not a great year last year, but he was starting to come on. So looked like their passing game was doing okay. Jaylen Warren carried the ball one time for 62 yards, and so maybe he's gonna be somebody that you might want to consider, but.
Yeah, lots of hype coming around the Steelers, and they have a lot of playmakers, so I understand why it is all going to rely on the quarterback. But we'll get into our our team review. We approach it from a redraft fantasy point of view, but we'll throw in real football, we'll throw in dynasty where we need to, and half PPR is kind of what we base all of our rankings and ADP on, kind of right in the middle if you play standard or if you play PPR. So we'll get right into it. The quarterback, Kenny Pickett, entering year 2. Didn't look great his rookie year. I think we can say that just being honest there. He started 12 games, played in 13 games, so he played a good portion of the season, threw 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, not good numbers, 2,400 yards. Was looking a little better there, I'd say, the last 3 games when he came back from his concussion. He was he wasn't amazing, but he was, completing maybe 60% of his passes, throwing a touchdown a game, only 1 interception, 200 yards or so he averaged. So it wasn't terrible. But people are excited about Kenny Pickett, about him improving, and a lot of hype about him improving this year. Dad, is Kenny Pickett right now at this point? He's basically just a quarterback 2, right? He's a backup quarterback for you for 1 quarterback leagues, I would assume.
Yeah, I think so. He didn't have really great numbers, last year, but you look at his last year at the University of Pittsburgh, man, he lit it up. So, he knows how to sling the ball around. I think maybe they were trying to, his development might have been a little slow because he didn't start off the year as a starting quarterback and all of that stuff. And so we better see some kind of jump, for Kenny Pickett. So right now, kind of a QB2, a guy sitting on your bench in your redraft league. I don't even know if he's a QB2 in a multi-quarterback league. I don't know. I'd be pushing it a little bit. Yeah, I think it might be okay. So we expect that second year, jump in performance. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's where he's being drafted. He's being drafted as the QB 19. So you can't leave your draft in a 12-team, 10-team, 12-team, even a 14-team, 1 quarterback league. You can't leave your draft with Kenny Pickett as your QB1. Something went wrong, terribly wrong. You gotta jump on with the Rodgers, Cousins, Jared Goff before it gets to that point. But yeah, throw him on your bench if you want and hold on to him the first few weeks, see how he looks, and maybe he has that big leap, and maybe he does become the QB1. or he's a waiver wire guy to target 2-3 weeks in, seeing how he plays. And if he's not looking very good, if he's throwing 200 yards and a touchdown every week, and he's averaging 15 points in fantasy, drop him, and you didn't spend too much on him. So the big thing with him is, can he make everyone on this team go? Because there's a lot of offensive players there. So you're right, we need to see that improvement, because there's really no excuse. We're going to get into it. You have a bunch of skill position players that are really good. You have an improved offensive line. You have a solid defense. This Kenny Pickett needs to take that step up. And there's really no excuse. It's not like he doesn't have any weapons. So one thing I will say about Kenny Pickett that there's some slight upside is basically when he took over as the starter, his first 8 games, he was averaging about 25 yards rushing a game. So he gives you a rushing floor. And again, you do the math. 25 yards rushing is 2.5 yards, 2.5 fantasy points a game. That's over, if you play in 4-point per passing touchdown, that's over half a touchdown. So every game you're getting an extra touchdown of production in rushing, right? So that's not nothing. That's a solid number, 25 rushing yards a game. That gives you over 400 yards for a season. So he was doing that, and then he got concussed in week 14. Missed the game because of the concussion, because that's kind of how the new rules are now. And then he basically didn't run after that. He had 12 yards rushing his final 3 games. So he just wasn't rushing the ball, which makes sense because he got concussed. So, and we saw it in college too. He does have the athleticism to be a runner. So he can give you a rushing production, but QB2, some upside as a backup. Mitch Trubisky is still there, a name to know, just in case if you are in a super flex 2-quarterback league. If Kenny Pickett does get hurt, Trubisky is a name to know. But we'll get into the running backs, which I think are pretty intriguing. We have a first-round pick from 2 years ago, Najee Harris, who had an amazing first year. That was when Ben Roethlisberger was there and dumping the ball off to Najee Harris. Najee Harris that year finished as the RB4, averaged over 15 points a game in half PPR, which is really, really good. That's league-winning stuff. And then Najee Harris last year, a little bit of a disappointment. He was the RB14. He averaged 12 points a game, so about 3.5 points less. But his weeks 11 to 18 were fantastic. Weeks 11 to 18, Najee Harris was the RB4, averaging almost 15 points a game. That was right around when he got that metal plate out of his foot. He had a foot injury, which, put 2 and 2 together, a foot injury for a running back does not sound like it's ideal. He gets that metal plate out, and then is it coincidence? Is it not? I don't know. He started to look like the old Najee Harris. Dad, how do you feel about Najee Harris? Because I think people are very polarized on him. I will tell you this. He's being drafted as the RB10. No, that's standard. Let me go to half PPR. Still, RB10, and he's going basically the end of second, beginning of third. Do you feel comfortable with that as his as maybe your RB1 or 2, Najee Harris in that range?
Yeah, I kind of do, but I have him on a dynasty team where I took him in the first round, and it was not great results. So like you said, his year last year didn't start off too well, and there were some problems with the Steelers' offensive line his first 2 years. They weren't great. I know they've drafted some guys and signed some people as free agents, so they're working on kind of getting that offensive line. This guy gets a lot of touches, though. He's involved with the passing game. He carries the ball quite a bit. Some of that may change now with Jalen Warren kind of starting to produce, but Najee Harris, late second round, early third round, I think I'm okay. He's going to get the touches, unless he's injured, which, his injuries are for relevant to anybody, but he's gonna get the ball. So hopefully he can produce.
Yeah. Led the league in touches his rookie year with 380 total touches. That was with 74 catches. Last year, that dipped. He dropped by about 70 touches, which is basically where the drop off from RB4 to RB14 comes from. 70 less touches, 30 less catches is a big one. My only issue, or the only thing I'm nervous about with Najee Harris, is he's averaged under 4 yards a carry each of his first 2 years. Is that more the Steelers' offensive line? Maybe. Is it Najee Harris? Is a little bit of both. Who knows? Yes, I do think he's going to get. You can kind of pencil him in for 300 touches, just like he had last year. My issue is, can he get more to like that 4.2 yards, 4.3 yards a carry rather than 3.8? Because if he gets 270 carries again and he's averaging, let's say, 4.3 yards a carry, now you're looking at closer to a 1,200-yard rusher instead of a 1,000-yard rusher, and that makes a big difference. I don't think he's going to get much more I don't think he's going to get back to his 70 catch that he had his rookie year. I think you can pencil him in for about what he had last year, his 40 catches, which is a solid number. That's a solid number for a starting running back. The key is, can he get the same amount of carries and average for a little over 4 yards a carry? And I think he can. Yeah, the Jaylen Warren thing is interesting. But again, we're talking about Najee, his rookie year. The guy was playing like 90% of the snaps. He was doing things that no running backs do. 90% of the snaps, he dominated the backfield. There was looks like 3 games in which he had less than 80% of the snaps. And he had like all the carries. I think there was like Steelers running backs had like 330 carries that year, and Najee had 307 of them. So it was insane. That's not going to happen anymore. But that doesn't mean he can't be good and can't be valuable. A little nervous taking him end of second as like, your top running back, maybe your RB2. Maybe if I think I feel a little more comfortable if I had like a mid to late round pick in that third round and I pick him up there. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Is he going to fall? Are they going to knock him down 4 or 5 spots because of Jaylen Warren? Then I'm happy to take him in that mid to late third round. I think in that early third, late second, there's a couple other guys that I prefer. Like Josh Jacobs was going in that range. Ramondre Stevenson's going in that range. I kind of prefer those 2 running backs to Najee. And also like Jalen Waddle is going in that range. Chris Olave is going in that range. I think I prefer those 2 guys as well. But after those guys, then you can definitely make a case for Najee. Jaylen Warren is part of the reason why people are worried about Najee. Jaylen Warren started to make a name for himself at the end of last year. He was I believe, I forget if he was drafted or not, but he's not a smaller back necessarily. He's 5'8", 215. He's not small. He's not big, but he's not small. He was a rookie last year. Didn't really do much until basically the last 6 or 7 games or so. And he started to make a name. He started to cut into Najee's snap percentage. The last 5 games of the season, Jaylen Warren basically averaged about 40% snap share. So it was like a 60-40 split between Najee and Jaylen Warren. And then, of course, Jaylen Warren, he looks more explosive than Najee Harris. You just can't deny it. You mentioned it, Dad. He had a 62-yard run last preseason game on, Saturday or Friday or something. And that's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore a player that can bust off a 60-yard run, because I don't think you're going to get that from Najee, really. What are you thinking about Jaylen Warren, Dad? Are you thinking I don't know. Should we be worried about Najee because of Warren, or is it just Warren's going to get his, Najee's going to get his, and they both can be, solid players?
Yeah. Just here's a couple of stats. Najee was average less than 4 yards a carry first 2 years. You mentioned that earlier. Well, Jaylen Warren almost averaged 5 yards a carry on 77 touches last year, or rushing the ball. So I think, definitely he could be a change of pace back for the Steelers. So yeah, that could cut into Najee's Najee's total, and and he caught the ball 28 times last year. So he's involved with the offense. Jalen Warren is. So
Yeah. Definitely. I will say about that yards per carry, sometimes it's a little misleading because these backs that come in on third down, obvious pass down situations, there's less of a they fill the box less. The defense will fill the box less. And so sometimes, especially when you get those like, oh, it's 3rd and 18, and then they just run like a draw play, the defenses are not trying to stop the run. They're making sure a big pass doesn't happen. And so a lot of times when you get that carry on that draw play on 3rd and 18, you get 10 yards because that's what the defense is giving you because they don't care if you get 10 yards. So something to keep in mind. But yes, he was involved 100%. And again, let's look at the last 4 games of the season. 11 carries, 6, 12, 6. So about 8-9 carries a game. And during that time, he was getting 2.5 catches a game. This is kind of what I see from Jalen Warren this year is 8 to 10 carries, a couple catches a game. And he's going to have to be very, very efficient in order for him to be fantasy relevant. He's going to kind of have to be like a Tony Pollard-esque player. Not last year because Tony Pollard was more involved in that, but maybe Tony Pollard from like 2021 where Tony Pollard is getting, he had some double-digit carry games. He had some 7 carry games, a couple catches here and there. Like he's going to have to be very efficient. It looks like he can be because he is more explosive. So he's a player that should definitely be drafted, but I'm not knocking Najee too far down because of Jalen Warren. That's kind of where I'm at with that. If you want to pair them together and kind of like handcuff Najee to Jalen Warren to Najee, that's fine too. Go for it, just in case Najee does go down. But at this point, he's a guy should be drafted. I'm not expecting a huge fantasy year from him unless Najee gets hurt. But I'm expecting like a guy that can maybe what you want him to get to is he's going to have the value of if Najee gets hurt, but can he be a spot starter? Can he be a guy that gets you during a heavy bye week? He gets you 10 points. I think he can get to that level. So that's kind of where I'm at with Jalen Warren. Anything else to add with those two guys? Anthony McFarland doesn't matter really, but anything else with those two running backs?
No, couple of decent running backs. So, they should, like you said, they should get drafted.
Yeah. And one last thing I will say is Mike Tomlin's history, and this is a long, long history now as a head coach, he's always been just feed one guy, right? Le'Veon Bell's and the James Conner and Najee Harris, like they never run 2 backs. That could change though. Again, it's hard to ignore when you see a guy against first stringers, I believe, starters, bust off a 62-yard run for a touchdown. Like it's hard to ignore that type of playmaking ability. So, but anyways, we'll get into the receivers. Interesting group again. You have Deontay Johnson, old Mr. Reliable, as the wide receiver 1. You have George Pickens, who is getting a lot of hype because he makes these spectacular catches. And then you have Allen Robinson, who's kind of burned people the last 2 years, back on the Steelers here. We'll start with Deontay Johnson, Dad. Dad, I want you to get what your feelings about Deontay Johnson personally first before I get into mine. I will say, just for reference, you can draft Deontay as the wide receiver 35, 81st overall. So you're looking 8th round. Go ahead. Sorry, 7th.
No,
round.
I think, 8th round.
I think it's 7th.
I'm sorry, what's that?
7th round.
Yeah, that's still pretty good. He seems to be, just a couple years ago, it was Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and Juju Smith-Schuster. So we see who's left. It's Deontay Johnson. So he's going into his 5th year. He seems to produce pretty well and have a decent amount of targets and He had one problem last year. He didn't have any touchdowns, so he caught the ball 86 times, and there was 0 touchdowns. So the year before, 2021, he had 8 touchdowns. So we need some touchdowns, Deontay, and for you to kind of be the man in Pittsburgh, fantasy-wise, wide receiver, we need to see some touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on all that and what you mentioned right now. I think Deontay is a huge, huge value. I think it's crazy that the next guy we're going to talk about, George Pickens, is going basically at the same spot as him. I think there's no way. Deontay is the clear-cut number one receiver on this team. He's had 140 or more targets 3 straight years. Here are the guys to do that. You ready? Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson, end of list. That's it. 3 guys in the last 3 years from 2020 to 2022 have 140 more targets. Again, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson. That's the list. And then if you want to expand that to guys who have had 2 in that range, there's only 4 more guys: Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, and Travis Kelce. So this is elite territory in which we're talking about. And targets are earned. Targets aren't just like, oh, we're going to throw. You have to earn your targets. And Deontay Johnson has done that with, and this is in a span, by the way, of Ben Roethlisberger, Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky, and Kenny Pickett. Basically 4 different quarterbacks over those 3 years that he's done that with. Whereas Stephon Diggs has done that with Josh Allen. Devontae did that with Aaron Rodgers for 2 years and then Derek Carr last year. Deontay's doing it with 4 kind of subpar quarterbacks, I would say. Ben Roethlisberger in his last year. So that's one thing, which is insane for Deontay. Another thing is, you mentioned it, 0 touchdowns. It was an anomaly, complete anomaly, because he had 16 red zone targets. I think that was 12th most in the NFL. He had more red zone targets than CeeDee Lamb, more red zone targets than A.J. Brown, more than Chris Godwin, than Christian Watson, than Juju, than Drake London, Mike Evans. He had more red zone targets than all those guys. He just didn't catch. He caught some, but none of them turned into touchdowns, which was just a complete anomaly. So that's not going to happen again. I think the Steelers as a whole only threw for like 12 touchdowns last year. So that's kind of part of the issue. But yeah, if you look at his previous 3 years, 5, 7, 8, so you're looking at 20 touchdowns, about 6 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns a year. If he can get back to that number, if he does exactly what he did last year. He was bad last year. He was wide receiver 39. He played in every single game as well. So that's really bad. You weren't even a wide receiver 3, and he didn't miss any time. He averaged 8.1 points a game. Really, really bad. But again, you get back to 5 or 6 touchdowns, his career average, you're looking at he was more going to be like a top 24 receiver. So I love Deontay. I love where he's going. Everything points nothing points to him not getting a bunch of targets again. The next guy we're going to talk about, George Pickens. I'm not afraid of him taking targets away from Deontay. I'm out on George Pickens. I'm not going to draft him where he's going. Dad, I don't know how you feel about George Pickens. Basically going in the same range as Deontay Johnson. The hype is real with George Pickens. Are you in on the hype?
Yeah, no. I should say he's very draftable. He's very fantasy football relevant. But, one of these guys is probably going to stand out a little bit more than another. And that's what we're choosing here. And I think you're saying, and I'm saying, Deontay Johnson is that guy.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. And again, I know it's easy to fall in love with George Pickens. These amazing catches he makes in practice, and half of them are offensive pass interference in practice anyways. But, these one-handed catches, and I'm not saying he's not a good receiver. I'm not saying would I be shocked if he had a really good year. Not necessarily. I'm not going to bank on it. He reminds me of like a Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker was one of these guys who the guy makes spectacular, amazing catches, but they're always in traffic. They're always in close coverage. And more often than not, he's not getting separation. And so, can he have a big boom year like Devontae Parker did in 2019? Yes. But then you look at 7 of the other 8 years that Devontae Parker played, and it's been very disappointing years. And that's just kind of what I see with George Pickens. Could he have a 1,000-yard season? Yes. I'm not going to bank on it, and I'm not going to draft him in over Deontay. I'm not going to draft him in the 7th round, kind of banking on that. So good player. I think it's good for Kenny Pickett. But I still think Deontay is by far the biggest target hog here. And I also think the next guy, Allen Robinson, is going to have a role in this offense. And the next guy we're going to talk about at tight end is also going to have a role. So you do the math here. The Steelers, are they going to throw it 600 times? I don't think so. I don't think they're going to throw it that much. Yeah, they're throwing it a lot in preseason, but they're going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to control the clock. They're going to want to let their defense play. They'll throw it more than last year, but 500 times, right? Like 520 times. Yeah. And you give Deontay, I give George Pickens like a 18% target share, right? And that's like 90 targets. That's kind of what I'm expecting for George Pickens. So Allen Robinson is on this team. I don't think he's really being drafted, and I understand why, because he's been very disappointing in the last 2 years. But he has his role on this team now. Like he's the wide receiver 3. He's maybe the 4th or 5th target on this team, if you count Freiermuth and the running back, Najee or Jalen Warren. Let's just say 4th targeted guy. I think he's just going to be that veteran possession receiver, kind of like what Juju was for them for the longest, just that possession receiver. And I can see him having like a solid year, which cuts into George Pickens' target share and stuff like that. Got any interest in Allen Robinson and drafting him, or
no?
A waiver wire guy if he hits.
Yeah, I think he's a waiver wire. I just, like you said, he's going to have a role in the offense, but he's 3rd or 4th on the list. So I just very disappointing with the Rams, even his last year with the Bears. 2 years ago, the guy had his heyday, and a few years ago with the Bears, and he doesn't seem to have reproduced that. So
yeah, and again he's under that 2 years of bad football, and you're an older guy, I'm generally out on. I'm not going to draft him. Keep an eye on him though, because I'm not going to be surprised if we're talking October, 5 weeks in, and we're saying like pick up Allen Robinson on the waiver wire. Like he's averaging 10 points a game in half PPR, or 9.5 points a game, and you can start him during a bye week because he has that little bit of a bounce back. Like. And again, it's part of the reason why I'm not so high on George Pickens. I think it's Deontay is the target hog. Deontay is going to get 25% of these passes that are taken, and I think you got to divide up the 75 between these 4: George Pickens, Allen Robinson, the tight ends, the running backs. So I wouldn't be surprised if he makes an impact. Calvin Austin is the last guy I want to mention. Rookie last year. Was basically, I think he was hurt all last year. He was a 4th round pick. I think Pickens was a 3rd round. Calvin Austin was a 4th round in last year's draft. He's just a complete burner. He's showing off in practice. The guy's tiny. He's 5'9", 162, but the guy is super fast. So I think he'll have a role on this team, which is another reason why I'm a little low on George Pickens, because I think Calvin Austin is going to be kind of that deep threat. He runs a low 4.3, so maybe for best ball. But we'll get into the tight ends. We have Pat Freiermuth, good, solid football player. I like Pat Freiermuth a lot. Good football player. He was, I'll tell you here in a second, he was the tight end 8 last year. So he was okay. He wasn't a difference maker. He averaged 7.8 points a game. That is not a difference maker. Pat Freiermuth he gets a good amount of targets. I think he didn't have any touchdowns or very little touchdowns last year, or was it reverse? He had two touchdowns last year. Yeah. So his rookie year, 7 touchdowns was part of the reason why he improved. He basically had the exact same number of receptions and yards last year as he did his rookie year, and receptions last year, but he had 250 more yards, 5 less touchdowns. That Pat Freiermuth, are you interested in him at all? Like, again, you have to take him if you want him. You have to take him as the tight end 8, and you have to take him over Deontay Johnson in that 7th round range. Are you interested at all?
That ain't happening. No, I'm interested in him as a fantasy tight end, just not in that draft location.
Yeah.
I don't see, kind of hate saying this word. I don't see the value there. I mean, just look at your tight ends carefully, man, before you make a draft. If you don't get, some of the premium guys, Andrews, Kelsey, Hawkinson, maybe even George Pickett and stuff like that. There's the rest of the guys, they're kind of, they all have a lot of similar stats.
Yeah.
And just take a look at that.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, you just look at again, he averaged 7.9 points last year. Basically, starting from there's like Njoku, and you go down about 10, 12 guys to about 10 guys to Juwan Johnson. They all average within a point of each other. Like, they're not difference makers. If you're set on taking a tight end this high, which I'm not, if you're set on taking a tight end in your top 7, 8 picks, just pay up and get a Dallas Goedert. Yeah, like, he's much more of a difference maker. I know you have to pay up about looks like about a round and a half earlier to take Goedert or Waller, but do that. Don't take Freiermuth in the 7th. Just take Goedert in the 5th or 6th, or Waller in the 5th or 6th. They're much more of a difference maker than a Pat Freiermuth. All these guys, actually, like Evan Ingram, Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku. Like, you look at the guys right behind them: Cole Kmet, Dalton Schultz, Tyler Higbee. These 3 guys, if you told me any of those 3 had a better season than Freiermuth, I wouldn't be surprised. And they're going 40 picks later. So, it's just too rich for my blood. He's a good player. He's going to get 60 catches, but it's just not going to be enough of a difference maker. So that's it with the Steelers. Interesting team, a lot of players here. So basically, what it sounds like is we're Kenny Pickett's a QB2, Najee Harris, like, we're okay with in that 3rd round. I'd like him a little later, but I'm not gonna freak out if you take him in the early 3rd. Deontay, we love the value, and then everyone else, it's kind of Pickens, Freiermuth. They're a little overvalued in our opinion. So that's where we are with the Steelers. Got any last words? It's going to be a good division, the AFC North, right?
Yeah, good division. They'll play well. Their defense, even though when they're a mediocre team, they're always kind of right there. Like last year, they they were fighting for a playoff spot. We'll see how it all kind of shakes out. Kenny Pickett's got to move up a notch. The running game has to move up a notch, and we'll see how it all shakes out.
100%. Yeah, they're always going to be there. They're always going to be competitive. Good coach, good defense. So it'll be a fun division to watch. But we're going to finish up there. One of our longer episodes. We'll be back tomorrow with our last 5 teams. The San Francisco 49ers is next on our list of another interesting team. As always, if you like the video and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next time.